I'm going to go ahead and move to Colonel Davis so that we can begin the process of finding out what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
And Ms. Holland, I have no objections with you sitting at the table next to Mr. Davis during the entire time. We're not going to put you on the Unglesby plan.
Good morning, Colonel. Mr. Chairman, Colonel Davis here, Louisiana State Police, Superintendent.
Thank you, Colonel. Please, you state your name for the record. Please, do you have a prepared statement or you just want to answer questions?
I would like to open with one thing. The tough questions I can deal with. I understand my position, understand my role. For me, what's tough about this entire process is for Ms. Horton to have to relive this over and over again. I've said this before. I don't like how we got here. I'm glad we're here. But I hate how we got here. I hate that she has to listen to this. There's nothing I could ever say. I have a son, and there's nothing I can ever say to comfort her, to show her my remorse. I just hate that she has to go through this. As I'm learning, as we go through these types of hearings, yes, one of you all mentioned that we are in conflict with our policy. We are in conflict with our laws. We are in conflict on a daily basis. And it's a tough position to be in. It's a tough position for me. It's a tough position for the men and women that serve in our agency. But yet they still come to work and they serve, even though we put them in a uncompromising position. We have investigations. We have built policies. You all have asked us to be professional and build those policies and then abide by those policies. And when we do, then we're in conflict with what's going on here, and that's tough. So I'm going to try my best to answer all of your questions because I want to see this come to fruition. I want to see you all get every possible answer that you're deserving, and I want to see Ms. Horton get every possible answer that she's deserving of.
Sure, and look, I think the issue the committee's having, Colonel, is that it seems to be selective following of policies, and I can give you a reference point is that we had Trooper Lee testify earlier this morning that he wasn't aware of the 2014 policy. Had he been aware of that policy, the policy exists whether he's aware of it or not. It's clear he did not follow that policy. So. And then we're finding out now y'all are instituting policies in 21 about things that should have happened in way before that. And so then the only policy you're really following or purporting to follow, I should say, I'm not even sure that you are, but purporting to follow is the one that prevents you from being completely transparent with the committee. So it's hard to accept both things, that you're vigilant on following policies, but yet Trooper Lee did not follow the policy, whether it was willful or ignorant, doesn't make a difference in my opinion. So it's hard to accept your vigilance and your sincerity on policy following when you're not following policy. We wouldn't even be having the discussion with Trooper Kane had you followed the policy. There should be a trail of those phones being wiped, coded as clear as day in your policies. If that had been done, we have no conversations about the policy of preventing Trooper Kane from testifying today. Do you understand that contradiction?
I certainly agree. I wholeheartedly agree. And that's why I put the policy in place because I agree with it. We should have had a policy years ago.
But you did in
We did
2014.
not. You're exactly right, sir. And that's why I put that policy in place.
Okay. I'm turning over to Representative Ilio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Colonel Davis.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
In your text to the governor on September 7th, 2021, you state Lieutenant Clary logged and submitted the videos in accordance with LSP policy. Was it LSP's policy to mislabel evidence?
No, ma'am.
So can you clarify for me how it is you determined he submitted the videos in accordance with LSP policy, but there was an investigation because he mislabeled the evidence?
So, according to LSP policy, our troopers are required to upload that video evidence, and upon uploading it, then properly categorizing it. And based upon the investigation that has been conducted, that's exactly what transpired. The night, as I understand it, and based upon the evidence and the facts that were presented to me, Lieutenant Clary uploaded the evidence, all of the evidence. It was not retrieved in the initial investigation, from what I understand. So the investigation came about as a result of some communication that was had between a couple of troopers, and one of them being then Sergeant Paxton, and I believe another trooper. And at that point, he realized that the fifth video, or the video that body-worn camera video that Lieutenant Clary had, was not initially provided to him during their initial criminal investigation. And again, this is 2021, I believe it is, April timeframe. Maybe off on months and dates, but I'll get you the exact time frame. But upon them having that conversation and him realizing that, then he made it known through his chain of command, at which point that information was provided to me. At that time, I authorized an internal investigation, administrative investigation into the incident, to make sure that there was no criminal and or administrative violations. During that conversation, during that investigation, Internal Affairs conducted that investigation. They interviewed multiple people who were there at the scene at the time of the incident, who were responsible, or in part responsible, for actually retrieving that information.
That was going to be my next question. Who was responsible for retrieving all of that evidence to deliver to the DA and didn't?
Well, I don't know who was responsible at that time. I can tell you, obviously, at that time, it was then Trooper Paxton was one of the case agents. I don't remember the other. I'll get you the name of all of the personnel on that was in place. Then Lieutenant Johnny Scott Brown was the sergeant, and then I think Gary Beasley was the lieutenant at that particular time, and the captain was Jason Turner. But that was the investigative team at that time. There were some more individuals, I don't have their names at this point, but that was also involved in the investigation.
Can you tell me how Lieutenant Clario's video was characterized or coded when it was loaded?
Not at this present time, but I can get you that.
If you can get me that information, since you maintain that it wasn't mislabeled, I'd certainly like to see.
Yes, ma'am.
Give me 1 second. How it was labeled. Okay. In that same text to the governor regarding Lieutenant Clary, you talk about a supplemental report regarding that investigation.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you make that supplemental report available to us?
Okay.
Because that hasn't been made available to us, am I correct?
I'm not sure, but I will make sure you get it.
Now, did you put any process in place following your internal investigation for future presentations of videos when you have incidents like this and they have to be turned over to a DA? Did you put any process in place going forward?
So one of the things that I really wanted to focus in on was really understanding what transpired. And as I learned during that investigation, the case agents did not realize that they had access to all of that information or video evidence. So one, that has been since made available to all of our investigations. Now, we do have some stipulations and restrictions. Anytime that there's an investigation of certain types of crimes, such as officer-involved shootings, such as investigations involving maybe public officials or such, then at that particular point, then we do what we call restriction of that evidence. We do not make it available to everybody to
Yes, I've seen on Axon where y'all decided to restrict the videos at some point.
Yes, ma'am. So at that point, it only is made available to a certain one, the senior command involved, as well as those case agents that's involved. But otherwise, all of that video is now made available. So if there's general video of a particular incident, then all of the troopers have access to it. So that was one of the main things we did. Two, I did impose a policy because we did have some issues, and I think you all spoke to it before with regards to people coming in and downloading videos to thumb drives and taking screenshots. So we changed the policy there because, again, we have to maintain the integrity of that case, that investigation, and of that incident. So
does the policy now prohibit that type of activity?
Yes, ma'am. So they are to transmit and or disseminate or, for instance, if I'm going to send some evidence, video evidence to someone, it's to be sent through the system, not to be downloaded to a thumb drive.
So, Colonel Davis, let's talk about the elephant in the room. What, pray tell, caused you during the middle of this committee's investigation to have an investigation of the wiping of phones, which is widely known, and then having Lieutenant Colonel Doug Kane be unable to testify, answer any questions regarding that today to this committee?
Great question, ma'am. If you all recall, there was a story, it may have been WFB or so forth, but Representative Jordan actually spoke to that issue, and it was not too long ago that he spoke to his concern and demanded results and demanded that we look into it. And as a result, that caused me to look into that matter.
The day before Lieutenant Colonel Doug Kane is scheduled to testify, we had the phones taken.
As far as when the phones were taken, as far as when Internal Affairs decided to do that, that was not under my instruction. They have a certain course. My instructions to them were to, one, investigate this matter. Investigate to determine who all had their phones wiped, why we didn't have a policy. I wanted a very detailed investigation of this matter.
But you knew about the wiping of the phones before this committee was put together, right?
Ma'am, it may come as a surprise. Maybe before this committee was convened, but back in the time when it occurred, no, ma'am, I did not. As stated,
not when it occurred, but certainly long before this committee convened.
Whenever it became public, and you know, when we look at things that happen in the public, that happen in the media, and as you all know, there's been a lot of things reported in the media. We have conducted more investigations probably in the last year and a half than we have in the last 5 years, with internal as well as criminal in my department. And that's because I want to make sure, and I want to get down to the truth of things. But, you know, at a point, you know, I'm looking at the balance of how much am I stressing my folks? What information am I receiving? From whom am I receiving that information from? And then from there, I determine whether or not I'm going to conduct an investigation. So when something is presented, and whether it be the wiping of the phones, whether it be there be complaints with regards to somebody saying that there was a certain activity then I take a look at that and I take it seriously. And I think that's what you all would want me to do.
Well, you can see the way it looks for us,
Yes, ma'am.
to us, I'm sure, and how it's playing out today. And I don't think it's playing out in a good light for state police.
I will say this. I will ensure you get the results, regardless of what those results are. We have timelines with these administrative investigations. And
what is the timeline?
Well, we have 60 days to conduct that investigation. And once we conduct it, unless we get a 15-day expansion from the subject that's being investigated or from the commission, but that's it. After that, then we have to complete it and we have to wrap it up.
I have a sneaking suspicion we'll still be here. So we will wait those results.
Yes, ma'am.
Colonel Davis, you were the captain of the technology section.
Yes, ma'am.
At the time these phones were wiped, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Apparently so.
So who was responsible for having or suggesting a policy should be in place relative to the retention of those records that fell under your division essentially when they were wiped?
Well, I made that decision as noted last year. But during that time, and I'll give you some background as to my position. In 2018, I was promoted to captain. And at that particular time, my job was we were bringing in a computer-aided dispatch records management system. We'd gotten the funding and we wanted to create a statewide system. So in doing so, I was assigned to do that. I was initially given 2 staff members, and of course, over the course of time, my staff grew, my responsibilities grew. I went from having those 2 staff members, and then that moved to 3. Then from there, I moved to taking over our radio communications section, which is largely responsible for all of our LWIN network, and that's a Louisiana Wireless Information Network, and those are the tower sites, which there are 141 of across the state. So I took that section. As noted at that particular time, we had quite a few storms, so that was our main responsibility, plus building out this CAD solution.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I know the chairman's going to impose that 10-minute rule on me. And here's where I'm going, and I think you know where I'm going. And in 2017, it was widely publicized that in the investigation of the Las Vegas side trip, that all the troopers involved deleted their text messages. Okay. And it was widely publicized at that time after 3 bites at the apple by state police in response to public record requests. Finally, state police admitted that they were state phones and that those messages were deleted and that there wasn't a policy in place to have prevented that, and that a policy was going to be put in place. And now we're sitting here, and I have a record dated February 24th, 2022, that a backup is to be created and stored on an external drive. So imagine, when you talk about stressing your troops, imagine how stressed we become when we find out that there's a news article in April 2017. Now we've got a death. We're not dealing with a side trip to Las Vegas. We're dealing with a death of a man. And then we find out 4 years or more than 4 years later, when this committee has been convened to investigate, that a policy is now in place to prevent that. Now, as captain of technology, when these phones were wiped, I'm just curious why there was no effort to put a policy in place then.
Because at that particular time, as I was explaining, my duties did not involve those phones. And because of that, I did not have any information, one, that they were being wiped. I did not have any conversation with anybody about them being wiped. I did not have any knowledge about it. So for that reason, I was not focused on that. My focus was on a computer-aided dispatch records management system. And as my duties grew, as my responsibilities grew, and as I was explaining, then as information became available, that's when I began to make changes. You know,
Wasn't that a violation of chain of command for other officers to direct your an employee you supervised to wipe their phones?
No, ma'am.
You don't believe that was a violation of chain of command?
No, ma'am.
And if it happened today under your watch, you still wouldn't consider it a violation of chain of command?
No, ma'am, because we operate off the premise of subject matter experts. And when I have a subject matter expert, their design and their job should be to work with anyone that they need to work with to get the job done. So if we stifle the process, and that's been a part of the state government for years. We build these chain of commands, we go through these chain of commands, and then when somebody's out, then something is stifled, and then it frustrates you all. So the way that I operate as far as the leader of my agency is I want my personnel to do the job the most efficient way possible, and sometimes that involves them going outside the chain of command. In fact, I encourage that.
But based on your policy, February 24th, 2022, you would encourage someone to go outside the chain of command and instruct Triette Lee to wipe the phones?
Well, I'm not saying I would instruct them to wipe a phone. I mean, I instruct them to follow the policy. But as far as them to go outside the chain of command, yes, ma'am, if that's going to be the most effective process, yes, ma'am, I do encourage that.
And last question, Colonel Davis. To your knowledge, I'm assuming since you were part of that internal investigation of Lieutenant Clary, how was it discovered that Lieutenant Clary's videos were not submitted to the DA?
Again, it was through that conversation between those two troopers, and when that was brought to our attention, then at that particular point, they wrote a supplemental report. When they wrote that supplemental report, I authorized an investigation, and that's how we discovered that it wasn't. It's my understanding that although it was not submitted with the initial criminal investigation, it was submitted with the internal investigation. Again, that was before I was agency head, but that's my understanding based upon the information received.
And Colonel, if I suggested to you that that's incorrect and that it was an audit team, do you have reason to dispute me on that?
Well, I don't, because again, that conversation was based off of the premise of the audit team. I convened the audit team, so I certainly understand and agree with that, but it was a conversation that was had by one of the audit team members with another trooper that led to that discovery.
Thank you. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Villio. Were you present in the meeting I talked about earlier with Trooper Kane in regards to where you met with District Attorney Belton?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that it has been at least insinuated that he became quite angry at the idea of Clary being prosecuted?
Yes, sir. That I've been made aware of that, but I've also been made aware that we supposedly flew up there in a helicopter as well.
But my point is, did he become angry? I'm asking you. I'm not really worried
Based
about
upon my observation, sir. We had some great discussions, in that conversation, we spoke with DA Belton, and he brought up some very, very good concerns. And when we watched the video, and he explained what his observations were, and I explained what mine, and everybody in that room explained what their observations and their concerns were.
Okay, well, hold on. I really want to unpack that. What was his observations?
Well, according to DA Belton, at one point, there was an instance where an audible noise was made by Mr. Greene. And during that particular time, he mentioned that that was the time that Mr. Greene must have been sprayed by OC spray. Well, we had that discussion, and based upon, again, all of our review, that was not conclusive.
So you say, and I hate the tyranny of acronyms. OC spray. I'm assuming.
Sorry.
No, I know it's probably pepper spray or colloquially
sir.
pepper spray. I just like it to be clear for people who are not in the state police jargon, law
sir,
enforcement jargon that we're talking. No, it's common. I just want to make sure that we keep the record kind of clear. So that was not your observation. So what is the significance on the pepper spray issue as far as that meeting is concerned?
Well, again, based upon my conversation with DA Belton, one, he advised that he reserved the right to obviously move forward with any charges. Two, he asked me about an investigation. into LSP. The third thing, he advised that he was looking at possibly moving on the heels of the federal investigation. He was looking at preferring charges as well.
So is your impersonation, because I think Colonel Reeves said something differently, that District Attorney Belton was interested in prosecuting the troopers involved?
That's my impression. Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you try to counsel him out of prosecuting the troopers involved?
No, sir. That's his prerogative. He's the DA, and once we gave that case to him, then that's within his authority.
Right, and I understand his authority, but you also provide an opinion, and I know law enforcement often does provide an opinion. And I think it would be disingenuous of us to suggest that law enforcement does not provide opinion to the district attorney about whether a case should be prosecuted or not.
Well, what I provided was what I saw, and I look at the facts of things. If you're telling me that you're going to file charges on this and you ask me what my opinion is, then I'm going to tell you this is what I see.
And what was that opinion? That's what I'm trying to find
But
out.
at that particular time, I did not see, and I still do not see, where OC spray was given to the trooper at that particular time.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I stated.
Could it be if District Attorney Belton, after that meeting, advised others that you were counseling, or you were of the opinion that it was not criminal conduct, would you think that might have happened based off of what you represented to him?
Well, I can't say that. You would have to ask DA Belton, but I've never said whether it was or was not criminal conduct. I can tell you that.
Okay. What was Scott Davis's role at State Police?
As it is today, he's our training academy supervisor, as well as a use of force subject matter expert.
So he's a use of force subject matter expert. He's reviewing videos, I'm assuming?
Yes, sir.
And who does he report to when he believes there's been a use of force violation after he reviews a video?
Generally, he can go through his chain of command. He can go to internal affairs. He can go to...
And who is his chain of command? Who's above him?
Well, he has Lieutenant Pat Jackson. He has Lieutenant... another lieutenant. He has his captain, which is J.B. Slayton. He has his major, which is David McClendon, and he has his lieutenant colonel, which is Chris Eskew.
And those are all on the use of force issue in a video that he reviews? Because he's supposed to review these videos, correct, as I understand it?
Yes, but one caveat to that, he was a part of a audit team, and during the course of that set of duties and responsibilities, he had another chain of command, and that chain of command was Captain Robert Hodges, and then from there, from Captain Robert Hodges to me.
Got it. Do you know if he was able to meet with Captain Hodges about his opinion on what he, as a use of force expert, do you know that he was able to meet with Hodges on that issue?
He had full access to Captain Hodges.
Did he ever talk to you directly since you were in his chain of command?
He's talked to me on probably one or two occasions, I think, regarding matters that, as he stated, fell in the gray area.
Now, you brought up the OC, as I like to more refer to pepper spray. Did the deceased Hollingsworth, did he put in his use of force report any mention of pepper spray?
Yes, sir, I believe he did.
And so we have Hollingsworth reporting using pepper spray, and then we have this issue in the video, but you're not sure that pepper spray was used? Is that?
It was not seen. I did not observe it during the course or during the part of the video that DA Belton presented. So
Okay.
During that conversation, we looked at a certain evidence, a certain video, and that's when we discussed it.
Okay. But that is out there in Hollingsworth's use of force report that he used pepper spray.
Yes, sir.
Has there been any consideration, considering the number 2 person, your direct subordinate, is now being investigated at your insinuation of putting him on administrative leave with pay?
So I did think through that, but based upon our policy, what we look at when we place someone on administrative leave is whether or not they're a threat to the public, whether or not they're a threat to themselves, whether or not they can perform their duties without impacting the investigation. Because this investigation is being conducted by our internal affairs, they report directly to me. They do not report to him. Two, it does not stop him from doing his duties and responsibilities, and he has not been deemed to be a threat to the public or himself. I believe that based upon our policy that we should remain and allow him, and I think we're obligated to allow him to go to work and give us the work that we expect of him.
You could see how, stepping back from the public lens, that it's concerning that the number 2 person who's in charge of the entire department, the only person who's above him is you.
Yes, sir.
And you may have more he may have more contact with subordinates than you do, is under investigation. I mean, you could see how the public would prefer to have somebody who's not leading the organization, who's having some issues, be a part of the agency on a daily basis. Do you see how that might look bad?
I do, but when we operate our agency, we get a ton of complaints. And I would submit to you that if I put everybody on administrative leave, whether it be leadership or otherwise, based upon complaints, you would not have state troopers working for you.
Totally understand that, because that's a wholly different scenario, because everybody who's dissatisfied with their interaction with the state trooper is probably going to form a complaint. That's not this scenario, though, Colonel, and I think you do know that. This is a person who's not really dealing with the public in the way you are insinuating, who has an allegation about hindering investigations, allegedly. I mean, if you take it to its logical conclusion.
Yes, sir.
I don't think that's the same. I don't think that's an apples to apples comparison. That's an apple to oranges comparison. How often does the chief of staff of state police be investigated internally in the last 20 years?
I do not know. I can't. I just simply don't know that answer. But what I can tell you,
to your knowledge, has one ever been investigated by internal investigations?
Yes, sir.
And how long ago was that?
That was approximately 4 years ago.
And were they put on administrative leave during the time of that investigation?
No, sir.
I think that's also concerning. But I'm going to stop talking and give some people else an opportunity to talk. Representative Marcel.
Thank you. How you doing today?
How you doing, ma'am?
I'm okay. Now, we clearly understand that you were not there. Well, you were not in charge, but you were at the state police when this incident happened with Ronald Greene. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you briefed when you took over as superintendent on the Ronald Greene death?
No, ma'am.
You were not briefed?
No, ma'am.
So you took over the number 1 position, and Reeves did not brief you on the ongoing investigation of Ronald Greene?
No, ma'am.
I find that troublesome. So you talked about going to D.A. Belton's office and viewing the video, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you did so, you said that you saw something different and you all had a difference of opinion. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Because D.A. Belton's wanted to bring charges, possible charges as it relates to the pepper spray, and you did not see the supporting evidence on the video. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
At that time, which video were you all viewing?
Well, as I understand it, we watched multiple videos. I know we discussed
because it's multiple videos out there. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you all look at all 5 of them?
I can't say we did.
So when you all initially handed over the stuff to the DA, the Clary video was not included in that. Is that accurate?
That's my understanding.
That's your understanding.
Yes, ma'am.
So can you possibly see where the public and many members of this committee can see that as a possible first sign of a cover-up when you don't hand over all of the information to a DA to look at, right? That's A. And then you come in and y'all meet with them, you and number 2, who now can't tell us why he sanitized his phone because you gave him a letter on March 4th telling him not to. Can you possibly see how we view this as a cover-up?
Yes, ma'am.
A, you did well. Let's start A. If we want to go back to A, you had a fatality where your troopers said that he died in an accident. Is that accurate?
I don't know. I wasn't there, and I wasn't in charge.
You've not looked at the crash report, sir?
Ma'am, I've looked at
Right.
the report.
Right,
As
so-
far as what they said, I can't speak to.
Okay. What they said is in the crash report. Is that accurate? The initial crash report.
Yes,
Is that accurate? And what they said was Ronald Greene died as a result of running from the police and having a crash. Is that accurate? I know you weren't there. I wasn't there either. But the report speaks for itself. Is that accurate?
Well, the report doesn't speak of the pursuit, and as far as the if you're talking about the criminal report, then that there is some.
No. The initial crash report that they reported to Ronald Greene's family, that he died as a result of a crash. Is that accurate?
I can't speak. I can't say, ma'am. I don't know. I simply don't know what they reported that night.
Okay. Did not. So you weren't briefed by Colonel Reeves.
Correct.
You've not viewed the crash report.
I have.
You have. And in that crash report, because we have it, I think the Senate has it, the whole nation has it.
Yes, ma'am.
So we all have it where they said he died as a result, and it was at first initially reported that he died as a result of the crash and not as a subsequent of any beatings.
Okay.
I mean, can we all agree on that? And you saying, no, you don't know. I mean, you sounding like the previous number 2 man.
No, ma'am. When you say that that's what was reported to the Greene family, I cannot say what was reported because I was not there. I was not in charge, and that's not what I've been briefed on. So I apologize.
What have you been briefed on? Let me step back, because maybe you haven't been briefed as I think the number 1 person should have been briefed, right? So what were you briefed on? What happened to Ronald Greene when you showed up as the superintendent? You were already there, right? Mm-hmm. And when you took over the position as the superintendent, what were you briefed on? Let me ask it a different way.
I did not receive a briefing with regards to any of that, any other criminal investigations. And that was part of the problem that I had. As I'm coming into this position, I am not receiving a briefing.
Do you think that should have happened?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I mean, every other command that I've been in, we usually have some sort of this is what's going on, with the exception of having to create a new section. But when I'm coming into an existing position, yes, there's normally a briefing that takes place.
So Superintendent Reeves failed to do that.
That's correct.
Okay. And so once you viewed the video, and you've already said that the pepper spray was one of the issues. What about the other issues that many of us, not just here, but throughout the nation, looked at and found to be just horrific of what happened to him? What about those videos? What did you think personally about those?
You know, the tough part of this position, and I'm not going to skirt this question.
Please don't.
I felt like crap as a state trooper, as a black man, as a man, period. Anytime we have a situation like that, whether it be on video or not, that disturbs me. And that video disturbed me. It disturbed me based upon our training and otherwise. Okay. But I also understand I would ask your consideration and understanding that I do represent our department. And my opinions count. They matter. They matter in litigation, in which we're currently involved in. They matter in investigations in which we're currently involved in.
Who is Lynn Marie? And what's her position?
Lynn Marie is a sergeant who works in technology and business support. That's where he's currently assigned.
Oh, that's where he's assigned?
Yes, ma'am.
Was he working doing this Ronald Greene investigation in that capacity? Technical support? Would he have anything to do?
I would have to confirm with you because there was a point where he was transferred from a different position.
He was transferred or demoted? Which one?
Both.
Was it lateral or both? So he was demoted.
Yes.
And did it have anything to do with the Ronald Greene's investigation?
Not to my knowledge, ma'am.
Not to your knowledge?
No, ma'am.
Would you say that, what's the morale of the state police currently?
It's tough. It's relatively low right now for a multitude of reasons. One being what we're going through. And I would submit to everybody that we put ourselves in this position. I say we, not every man and woman, but those that played a part in not being forthcoming in certain respects. We as in leaders.
So you
of
do
our
agree that
organizations.
some people played a part in not being forthright and coming forth with the truth. You agree with that?
Yeah, that's something that I've experienced with the media. But there's another component.
The
to it
media?
as well, if you would allow me, when we look at what's going on today with the climate of anti-police, defund the police, that adds stress. When we look at that, we lost a trooper. That adds stress. When we look at the increase in duties and responsibilities and the decrease in personnel, that adds stress. So for those reasons, all compiled, morale is low. And when I spoke of with regards to media, one of the things that I came into this position, there were some issues with regards to the media. And I spoke with the media, and I'm still speaking with the media. And one of the things that was revealed to me is that we were not forthcoming. We were not making ourselves available to the media or to anyone else for that matter.
And do you think
I hope
today's
that you all will see that that's exactly, we're moving beyond that and we are making ourselves available. I'm sorry.
do you think that today's testimony by you and number 2 helps that or hinders that?
Well, I'm hoping that my testimony helps that.
Well, I can't agree with you that it does. I think it really clouds it more. The fact that we can't get any answers to why the phone was sanitized, the fact that you gave him the order on the day that we were here, the fact that you didn't see it the way Belton saw it, that someone should have been prosecuted. And if you were, the other question that I have, and I know in other states, where there's ongoing investigation. If you were to feel that any of your troopers should be not only should be removed because of this investigation, why wouldn't you move towards that without waiting on the other investigation to be complete? Because
Well,
I hear a lot of it's been investigated by someone else and we like to wait. But in other states, in Minnesota they did it, and in other states they've moved forward with removing bad apples. Because overall I believe the department is good, but there are a few bad apples, and I think the sooner we take them out, the better we are. Maybe we can get to some answers on this Ronald Greene's death.
I think you'd see when I came into office, I did just that, and I've continued to do just that. I've arrested troopers. I have removed troopers and personnel from our agency.
Let's stick to Ronald Greene's though. I don't want to, I'm about to run out of time. Who have you arrested or removed since on this Ronald Greene's case?
I have not. That investigation.
That's my question.
And I appreciate your question, ma'am. But as I understand it, that investigation was already conducted, was already presented to the DA, who now has it, as well as being investigated by the federal authorities.
And what you,
for that,
I don't want to cut you off, but what you're implying is the investigation was over. So since you're the superintendent, if you see it differently, if you have another set of eyes, you could look at that material and actually change, move forward with your own discipline, couldn't you?
I can, the DA can. As well, ma'am.
I'm not talking to the DA though. I'd ask him if he was sitting here. I'm talking to you. You could move forward with removing officers if you felt that they acted inappropriately or criminal or covered up something or didn't turn on the body camera. I think that was one of the issues that we had with York, that he turned off his body camera, and for that he was just disciplined, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Even though someone died, even though it was a part of a cover-up, a grand cover-up. When you cut off a body camera and you one of those body cameras, one of those views, and probably had a better view than anyone else, that would have probably shown us significant amount of stuff that we didn't even see. But for the fact that this video was leaked, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, because all of the citizens and poor Miss Greene would believe that her son died in a crash, but for the fact that it was leaked. Because y'all didn't show it to us. Y'all didn't show it to the public, did you?
Actually, I did authorize the release of that video
When?
it was leaked.
Once it was leaked, sir. I mean, that's after the fact. That's like me telling my kids I'm going to whoop you after I done caught you doing something wrong.
Well, one of the tough parts of this particular job being in law enforcement, when we make an arrest and we go and we put forth a case to the district attorney or whether it be to the U.S. attorney, oftentimes that there are policies, there are rules that govern how we interact or how we manage that case beyond that point. And if we do so recklessly or we do so
Right, but you weren't-
haphazardly, then that could
I get it.
impact the integrity of that investigation.
I
in that
get it,
case.
but the integrity of the entire state police is under a microscope right now.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think you need to look at that. And I think you need to look at the investigation for yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
Not for Reeves, who you already said didn't brief you. You already said you came in and he didn't tell you what you should have known about this case. So you need to look at this with fresh eyes and see who needs to be where or who needs to be further disciplined. Not wait on the DA, not wait on the AG. You have the authority to do that, and that's what I'm asking you to do, to look at it a fresh set of eyes. And look at all the videos.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative
Right?
Marcel.
And I'm finished. I'm finished. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And for the record, Representative Marcel requested the 10-minute time rule. I just want
I know I did.
I just want to put it out there. Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'll definitely be very brief. Good afternoon. I'll try to do it in two. First of all, good afternoon, Colonel.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, and look, I want to state for the record. I mean, because we've had these conversations, and so we may not agree on everything, but we do agree on a lot of improvements that you've made since you've started as Colonel of State Police.
Thank you, sir.
So I do want to recognize that. That being said, I have a couple of issues. I mean, I understand that you're saying that you looked at an interview that I did with a station and maybe that prompted or maybe was a catalyst for you starting this investigation. But, I tried to look back, and I think that was like in the beginning and middle of February. So that's at least about a month ago. We've had about a month in between the time that I made comments about Doug Kane and I guess yesterday. So that's almost a month that's expired during that time. So you'd agree with that?
I can't say when I saw it, but if that's what you say, when you did it.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So here's I guess one of the questions that I have as it relates to Lieutenant Colonel Kane. I saw one of your interviews on I think it was BRZ, but I'm not sure. But the question was asked to you, why did Lieutenant Colonel Kane sanitize his phone? And I think your response, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was somewhat to the effect that you didn't really have any idea why he sanitized his phone.
Okay.
Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, sir. And at this point, I still don't know why.
All right. So I guess, and that leads me to say, okay, if we don't know why, out of an abundance of caution, and I understand everything that you told Representative McGee of why he's still there, but I would think out of an abundance of caution, if we don't know why, then we should err on the side of caution and why not do the paid leave, administrative leave, and let me say this other thing. With you telling me that the morale of the troopers are low, I heard you mention a lot of factors, but you didn't mention the fact that Lieutenant Colonel Kane is still on the job. Could that play a role in the low morale as well?
If that's what's been communicated, then that could very well. I mean, morale could be low based upon leadership at times. So yes, sir, that could be.
Well, let me ask it this way: Have you placed other people? I'm not saying in every case, but in some cases, have you placed people on administrative leave when they become the subject of an IA investigation?
When it met the criteria that I explained earlier, yes, sir.
When it met the fact of whether they could still do their job,
Danger to the public or themselves, whether or not it would impact the investigation, things of that nature.
How about whether or not it would erode the public trust?
Well, and again, I know that's tough, but when a complaint is made against our troopers, then in some way, shape, or form, that erodes the public trust. Whether it be that one individual, multiple individuals, we live in a society right now where things are automatically sent out via public media. So whenever a complaint is made, then it's eroding the public trust, and it's our job to build it. But at the same time, we also have to do that through consistency. And when we're dealing with a department, and we're dealing with a profession where if everybody feels that their career will be threatened just by the mere nature of a complaint, then we're going to find ourselves without a profession that will go to bat and do the things that our men and women do. And I think we have to be very careful about that.
No, and I agree with you. But like as the kids say, there's levels to this. So the level of a guy that's on the road, I understand that. And if it were something, for instance, the guy wrote a ticket to me, he said I was speeding. He's writing a bunch of tickets to people who aren't really speeding. He's just trying to, increase the coffers of the state government. Yeah, I get that. But again, I think as Representative Marcel and others have said, we're talking about the number 2 person in state police, and we're talking about the potential cover-up of a fatality. So while I get that any complaint in and of itself, inherent in that, is maybe some erosion of public trust, this is a different level. This is of a different degree and magnitude than those other ones. So it's just hard for me to fathom that somebody could be in that position, have this, call it what it is, this cloud over them, because it is unknown, and he's still working. To me, it's better that he would be on administrative leave, and if he's cleared, great. I would hope that he is, and if he's cleared, fine. But until that time, that there be some safety measures, some guardrails put in place, and I think helping the morale of state police. Because if I were a low-ranking trooper, and I were getting dinged for every little deal, and I look at the number 2 and the allegations against him, and he's still on the job, I'd feel some kind of way about that.
I understand your concern.
I would. Now, that being said, so let's move on. I talked to Colonel Reeves last week, and we talked about York, and we talked about that he falsified his report. We talked about he was in Troop F. He had some other things going on, but we also talked about that he dragged Ronald Greene and put his foot on his back as well. We talked about all those things, and he only got 50 hours. Would you say that maybe something like that lowers the morale of the troopers as well?
Most certainly.
Okay. Did you agree with the punishment that York received?
No, sir, and I think that's been noted in my delivery of that particular message. And no, I did not agree with it. But also when we talk about the processes, we talk about the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, and it's clear. If we do not administer discipline at a certain time frame, then that discipline will be voided. So based upon the time frame that this was brought to me, based upon the information that I had and the lack of information that I had, I felt that some discipline was better than no discipline.
Right. So when you say when it was brought to you, explain that a little bit clearer.
Well, obviously that letter was already constructed, that the disciplinary review panel was already convened, and that decision was already made. The letter was just sitting there. And obviously, because of when Colonel Reeves retired, and by the time that I came into office, then we were at the back end of that 60 days. So it left me little time to go back and initiate an investigation to further look at what would I have disciplined at. But based upon the initial information that I had, I did not feel comfortable with saying what that discipline should have been. I did know that 50 hours, as far as I'm concerned, wasn't something that I would have provided.
So let me, and this will be my last question on this, I think. But in your opinion, do you think that that letter was crafted and that disciplinary process started for whatever reason to make sure he was disciplined before you really had a chance to evaluate and make your determination?
Well, I don't have the information, and you all will find with me. I don't speculate much. I follow the
I
facts,
understand.
and I think that's in best practice.
So I will ask just one last one then. Is it reasonable, could someone draw a reasonable inference or conclusion that it might have been done to avoid him being disciplined under your tenure?
Yes, sir. Someone could.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative Jordan. Representative Bacala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we all recognize here in the room that you inherited a horrible situation, and you inherited some months. How many months after the incident? I'm sorry, I don't remember when you were promoted.
October 30th was the time that I took over.
Six-
2020.
So 18 months or so, or whatever, something
Yes,
like
sir.
that.
Yes, sir.
So a year and a half after the incident, you're placed in command of state police, and this is, I think, very much on your plate from day one.
Yes, sir.
Probably as much as anything, this has shaped the first couple years of your tenure.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure, I know you were in the audience at the last meeting, and I want to go back to the basics here. You heard the testimony given earlier that basically it was a hands-off approach. Let's let IA do IA. Let's let criminal investigations do criminal investigations, and let me know when you're finished. Is that a policy that you have seen necessary to change?
Well, I think that was that leadership philosophy is not mine. My leadership philosophy is trust but verify. And, I've worked in certain, most, if not all of the major commands here. And it's been my experience that the more you know, the better you are to make a decision. So I'm of the mindset of I like to know more so that I can better explain, so that I can make a better decision. And I think that works better for everybody, whether it be the victim, whether it be the trooper, whether it be anybody involved. So again, that's not my philosophy.
Well, thank you. So you have a philosophy of being more engaged, I guess would be the easy way to say it.
I think my folks will tell you that I'm much more engaged.
I think this is important for anybody who's paying attention and note is I think everybody on this committee has been contacted by line troopers out of the blue, on the street, whatever, and all of them have actually said thank you for this investigation. It needs to happen. The average trooper's taking a beating for something that he disagrees with or does not agree with. I mean, they would look and say something should have been done, is what we hear over and over again. And they're as shocked, I think, as we are and as the public is, that so little was done in this early stage. Now, later on, I expect to hear from the criminal investigators, maybe the IA, and I think they will say that what they saw was troubling and they thought action needed to be taken. I think we'll hear from a DA who said it was troubling and they thought action should be taken. We know eventually it landed. But why do you think everybody who was in authority, everybody I think, who was in the investigative mode, in the review mode, looked at this thing and said, this is not proper? I think everybody did. Everybody. There was nobody that tried to defend the actions who was part of the investigative team. If everybody that is investigating, if everybody on the investigative team says we got to do something, why wasn't something done?
Great question. And
Well, I know you're digging in, so I'm hoping you can give me the answer. Because I know you're engaged. So, and listen, it may not be a comfortable answer, but sometimes it takes courage to tell the truth. And I would hope that you would say, you know what? Here's why the investigators were turned away. Here's why the DA was. I don't know. I'm just hoping that we will get.
I think you all, and I can't give an answer to something that happened 18 months prior to me getting here. And as much as I would like to, and I'm like everybody else, I want an answer. I want an answer because they're taking a beating. I'm taking a beating, and I'm taking a beating because of something that happened before my command here. And what really hurts me more than taking a beating is really to see those men and women take a beating every day. So I want an answer.
Yeah.
It hurts me to see Miss Greene go through this every day, every time we come up here. I mean, Miss Harden. So, no, I want an answer.
But the truth
I don't have that
here's
answer.
just my take on it. If I'm investigating an incident, I'm conducting a criminal investigation, and I come to a conclusion that we got to do something, it's not somebody below me that's going to convince me not to do what my professional intuition or what evidence leads me to. The only person that can tell me do not, when probable cause exists, convince me to do nothing, it has to be somebody above me.
And I certainly understand.
And
But
I think if we eventually today, I think we will hear testimony, I think, from investigators who said they went to their bosses and said, we got to do something, but they were shut down. I think that's what we're going to hear. And again, I know that you're digging in on this, and you've apparently broadened the IA investigation. Have you broadened the IA investigation to seek to determine who shut down the investigation?
that was a part of the investigation. And one of the investigations that I conducted,
Is that
I looked at, based upon complaints, I looked at whether or not there was evidence, because there were complaints that someone said that I was told not to conduct this investigation. And I will tell you again, and I will submit that based upon that investigation, there was not sufficient evidence for me to prove that. Like everybody else, if I've got the facts, then I'm going to act. And I hope that my record stands on that and have shown that. But when the facts are not there, then I cannot.
And I don't mean to jump into you, but I guess my concern here is a couple things. Is first,
I'll let you have the mic, Mr. Chairman. I was probably at 9 minutes, so.
you were. We're talking about goes down to what somebody said. And so one person obviously is denying saying it, one person saying they said that. Now, there's only one way to prove that, unquestionably, is with some sort of audio or video recording of it. So if your answer is I can't punish anybody because, or our independent witness, I guess would be another person, but if there's only two people in the room, I guess my concern is that that's a low bar. Ultimately, when we're not trying to criminally prosecute him if it's an IA investigation, just whether you should still be on the job. It's a little bit different.
Sir, if I remove everybody off the job because of what someone else said, again, we would not have troopers on this job.
Right, but again, look, that's you've mentioned it a couple times, and I think that's sort of a bad answer, and I'm going to be very respectful with you because this is not troopers on the road in that sort of adversarial relation. We're talking about an investigation amongst troopers, and troopers are saying this about other troopers. This isn't necessarily the same thing, and I can't keep harping upon that because I think that's a cop-out at the end of the day. I really do.
I would respectfully disagree because I have to follow the facts, and that's what the law provides for me. And I can't go just based upon someone's commentary. I have to look at all the facts.
And let me be very clear with you. Let's back up. I think it's inescapable. I didn't know anything about this case, honestly, a month ago, other than when I saw the video that everybody else saw, but I knew that none of the details of the investigation. It is unescapable to me that John Clary was not truthful on his initial statement to state troopers. I don't see how a reasonable human being can come to any other conclusion. I'll add to you that coupled with the fact that he's the supervising trooper on the scene of what I've heard nobody disagree, which is a horrible incident. it is hard for me to understand how you couple those two facts together and this person is still employed with state police following the facts, as you call it. It seems to me we wouldn't be here if we followed the facts at any point on those two, to me, inescapable conclusions. I wish there was another conclusion to withdraw. And look, people are gonna. I'm sure Trooper Paxton's gonna come here and testify in a little bit, and that may be what it is. And I will say this to him: I think he could ask better questions of Clary that morning. I think he could have done a better job, but that does not excuse John Clary of saying, "Hey, there was an incident. People were use of force was used." I mean, if you hear Clary's statement, which I hope you did as the superintendent, it is inescapable to me that he is being intentionally. I mean, he sounds like it's a regular road incident. They were actually almost sounds like he's a good Samaritan, that the troopers on the scene were propping his head up so he can breathe. It's almost offensive to what actually happened. And yet nobody from state police I've heard Colonel Reeves say that nobody misled anybody. That I don't even know how you can draw that conclusion from that. Or if you haven't listened to the audio, how you can make that statement without being based on reviewing that. But I still, and I want to give you the opportunity to respond to this, cannot escape those two facts. Supervisor on the scene, to me, is enough, actually, of what transpired, that he doesn't stop everything immediately. Second, that he then is truly leaving out huge gaps of important information that nobody can say you forgot, you wasn't clear to you. I mean, that is pushing the limits of plausibility, and yet he's still employed by state police as we sit here today. And so if you're telling me that the processes work, I can't accept that, because your processes are not working under those two conclusions. That's just, and it's 3 years down the road. And I'd love to hear your response to that.
As I mentioned before, and you know what, I've conducted investigations, and when you have a lack of physical evidence in certain respects and certain types of crimes or certain types of investigations, then you have to defer to those that were involved, and you have to look and listen to their testimony. And then you have to make sure that their testimonies, whether it be reasonable or not, whether or not you can provide a conclusion based upon those testimonies as they have said. And when we conducted this investigation with regards to Lieutenant Clary's video and the submission of his video.
I'm talking about the statement he made, which is on audio recording, Colonel.
I understand that, sir. And at the same time, we also spoke to other people that was involved in the investigative process. And those were all of the facts that we used and all of the evidence that we used to come and draw that conclusion. And while I understand you don't have access to that, and you may or may not, but I will.
But what else? I want to know, what else is there possible that when somebody's asked to describe an incident, mm-hmm. and they don't tell you everything, and they leave out all the bad stuff? If I ask my kid, did you steal the ball? And then tell me what happened in the bedroom when I know they stole the ball, and they tell me everything that happened in the bedroom except for the stealing of the ball, it's pretty clear that they've been not telling me the truth. I don't need 85 other versions of this story to come out for me to know that somebody was not upfront and honest with me from the get-go. Second of all, he's still the supervising officer on the scene. I mean, this is it's hard for me to buy in, and I think that's when Representative Baclaw refers to the troopers. That's what they tell me too. This is the same thing that I'm hearing from the troopers on the road who are frustrated as I am at this fact, because it's obvious.
The easy thing for me to do is come in and fire people based upon circumstantial information. And when I do that, and when they get their jobs back, we're wasting taxpayers' money. We're also lowering their morale, and we're also impacting the efficiency of
Colonel,
our agency.
An audio recording is not circumstantial evidence. I cannot let you equivocate on things that are not the truth. An audio recording and then a typed report or transcript that is not circumstantial. That is an established fact.
But we also have other facts from other investigators that were on scene, and we have to take that into account. And I have to stand on that, sir.
So what are these facts that you think mitigate that?
If you would allow me to provide that to you, because I understand that this is a public setting here. And as much as it is a investigatory process for you all, but allow me to provide that to you. And then from there,
I've been waiting.
yes, sir.
It's been 3.5 years. I mean, I think we've all been waiting. But I will give the microphone to Representative Villio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me again. Colonel Davis, I appreciate the comments of my colleagues to you earlier. An elected official in my hometown recently said, you can delegate authority, but you cannot delegate responsibility. That comment struck me then, and it struck me now. I heard your answers to Representative Marcel, but wasn't it your responsibility, sir, to ask for a transition document?
Well, yes, if I would have known that. This position doesn't come with instructions. I mean, when you're appointed to this position, it doesn't come with instructions. I found out about a transitional document that had taken place, I don't have the exact date, years before, after I physically got into office. So coming from the position that I was, I had no expectations as to what exactly I was to receive outside of maybe a briefing. But as far as a transitional document, well, yeah, I could have asked for one, ma'am, but it doesn't mean that I would have gotten it, and it wasn't presented. Now, that's something that I will provide to the next superintendent. I can assure you that. But that's not something, and yes, that's my responsibility, and I own that. But that's why I'm making sure that the next one has a transitional document.
Let's go back to the audit team that we talked about. Isn't it true, sir, that the audit team was put together to review all videos from Troop E, F, and G to look for other use of force issues, and the audit team was not put in place for any videos associated with the Greene matter?
They were instructed to look for all, and when I say all troops around the state, but it was going to be a phased approach, starting with Troop F, then moving throughout that Region 3 area, and then moving to Region 2, Region 1. So their instructions were to look at videos and all of the different troops.
And but for the audit team's discovery of Lieutenant Clary's video, the light shining on the injustices that occurred on May 10th, 2019 would never be known and have come to light. Isn't that true, sir?
Oh, that's possible.
Colonel Davis, I'll close with this. You're the head of state police. If you want answers, you can demand them.
Yes, ma'am.
When you get those answers, please give them to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Villio. Representative Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Colonel, good to see you again. I want to read a text message that you sent to Governor Edwards on or about June 29th. Governor Edwards, Chris Nakamoto is reporting that he interviewed Trooper Carl Cavalier. According to the story, Trooper Cavalier is suggesting that LSP personnel involved in the Ronald Greene investigation be arrested, including and up to former Colonel Kevin Reeves. We are confirming the validity of the information being reported. Once we determine its validity, I will decide on the next course of action. I will schedule a meeting to further discuss. What was the next course of action?
I think it was to meet to advise them that we did confirm that was, in fact, that interview did take place, or that information was provided. Mm-hmm. And from there, I think we issued a letter to then Trooper Cavalier to cease, according to policy, that you're to be authorized to provide public media commentary, and you were not. So as such, basically cease and desist.
Okay. And what ultimately happened to Trooper Cavalier? Was he disciplined or?
Yes, for that he was disciplined. Initially, he was again warned. I made a conscious decision because not everybody is familiar with all of our policies. So I made a decision to say, hey, warn him, let him know. And then from there, he continued to violate policy. As such, we again imposed more severe discipline to try and dissuade that behavior. And from there, again, that behavior continued, and as such, along with some other policy violations, led to his dismissal.
Okay.
But if you would, sir, I mean, and while I would love to tell everything, we are involved in litigation at this particular point.
I'm not going into that any further. You made the comment some discipline is better than no discipline. The 50-hour discipline, in my opinion,
Yes, sir.
that was the equivalent to no discipline,
I understand.
in my opinion. So you could have just not disciplined at all. I see Lieutenant Colonel Kane is no longer in the room, but he made reference, and I keep hearing, references, but, he made a reference that the media inaccurately reported referring to Mr. Greene's death as the result of a car crash, and that wasn't coming from state police. But I don't know if state police, he said that the PIO or whoever never put out a press release saying that he died of a car crash. I don't know if state police ever said anything to dispel that narrative. To your knowledge, do you know?
I do not know.
And Colonel Reeves even testified on March 15th. I just listened. I went back and watched it. He said, quote, the preliminary autopsy results. First of all, he laid the case that Mr. Greene had cocaine and alcohol and painted this grim picture. And then he said, quote, the preliminary autopsy results reflected a torn aorta and separated spleen. I believe this is the reason the initial cause of death was attributed to injury sustained from the wreck, unquote. So, seems like that narrative was supported by state police, in my opinion. While you're at the table, I'll just reiterate what I told to Lieutenant Colonel Kane, and it's no disrespect to him, but I am of the belief, because of his position, and some of the compelling allegations, I do not think the way that we rebuild trust is to have an individual in that capacity. It's my belief he should be placed on administrative leave. I'm not calling for his termination because I do believe he should have due process. But I just wanted to reiterate that to you, and of course you've already made your position on the matter clear.
I will tell you this, sir. I will definitely go back and review and consider that.
Okay. And just finally, I want to reiterate, I know we've had to ask some tough questions.
Sir.
But it's not, I want to be clear from my perspective. My tough questions to certain top brass is in no way a reflection of the overwhelming majority of the women and men of state police, who I believe to be good, honorable, decent people. And so I want the public to know that, but in no way am I trying to paint this grim picture, because I believe they're really good people. I'm grateful for their service. Many of them protect us around this Capitol on a daily basis. They protect us on the streets, and I just want to publicly say that I'm grateful for their service. So,
Well, thank you, sir, because that means the world to them. As I mentioned before, what they do day in and day out and how they sacrifice time with their family matters. And hearing that from you all, I mean this wholeheartedly, means the world to them. And it means the world to me.
thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
No problem. Thank you so much. Representative Nelson.
Hey, Colonel. Once again, when I come up, it's almost over, so it's good news. So I just have a few questions. I try not to be repetitive of what my colleagues asked, but so I think you were here last week when Colonel Reeves testified. He kind of gave us the impression that the governor's office was very disconnected, not very engaged in any of the Ronald Greene investigation. Didn't really know any details. I think he told us specifically that the governor's office never requested a detailed briefing, was never given a detailed briefing, probably up to the time in fall of 2020 when the family reviewed the video and the governor reviewed the video. So my question for you is, after you took office kind of after that, or you were appointed your position. Is that consistent with what you have heard or seen or experienced with the governor's office, that they were basically, kind of oblivious to what was going on up until that point?
I don't know about that particular situation. I can tell you, based upon my experience with the governor, is that I'm engaged and he's engaged. And I'll tell you, to a certain level, I come from a military background, and I believe in briefing my boss. So I don't want him to have to ask me certain things. If there is a significant event, then I'm going to, one, notify him as early as possible, but two, I'm going to try to follow that up with a briefing whenever possible or whenever needed. For the most part, I determine that. But I also gauge that based upon my relationship with him, my communication with him. If he's asking more questions, then I need to provide more information. And as I get to that point of providing more information, he's asking less questions, then that's how I draw my conclusion as to where that balance is.
So your experience would be the governor really is interested in the details, and you keep him abreast of the situation, correct?
I would like to think he is. I provide him those details.
I appreciate it. Yeah, so I think, so what Colonel Edmonston testified before Colonel Reeves was, I think, in the same lines as what you're telling us. And then it seems like Colonel Reeves, at least in the context of this investigation or this situation, he seemed like the governor's office was very disconnected and they were never briefed on anything. So I appreciate that. And would you say that that since you from the time that you took over through May 21st, when the video from AP was released, did anything change with your relationship with the governor's office? Did you start briefing him more often? Would it become more interested, or was it from the time you took over, it was always engaged in it?
I think it's grown since that time, and a lot of that growth has taken place with me. Again, my understanding. As I've come into this position, as you all have mentioned, I came in with a lot of stuff, a lot of things that were happening in the agency and happening to the agency. And as a result, and I hate to term it in terms of sports, but that's my background, forgive me. It's kind of like being a batter, and that ball is coming at you and you're not seeing nothing but a dot. And that those were the first months that I'm coming into, because I'm dealing with arrests, I'm dealing with dealt with a suicide, I'm dealing with allegations of other things that's going on with the agency. But as time progressed, then I began to start to see the ball, I began to start to see the stripes, and I began to acclimate to the speed of what was going on and the responsibilities of this position. So as a result, I've made some adjustments, and I think I've been able to help make adjustments based upon my communication with the governor's office or with the governor. And as a result, again, striking that balance. So to answer your question, over time, I began to make adjustments of our communication, and I think that has helped hopefully make him feel at ease with regards to my leadership, my communication, and what was going on with the agency.
Thank you. So my last question would be, when you and Lieutenant Colonel Kane went up to meet with D.A. Belton, did you brief the governor? Was he involved in that at all? Did he know you were going to meet him? Did you brief him afterward?
I did have a conversation with him afterwards, but I did not brief him beforehand. I make it a point to talk to our law enforcement partners, and 42 DAs, 300 plus chiefs, 64 sheriffs. I meet with them. I've just finished a tour of going around the state meeting with sheriffs and DAs, and I haven't talked to the governor about that unless it's some significant events that come as a result of those conversations and our meetings. So to answer your question again, no, sir, I did not tell him prior to, but I did have a conversation afterwards based upon my conversation with Mr. Belton.
All right. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. Representative Landry.
Hello, just a few quick questions for you. My understanding is that, so in May 2021, when the video was publicly released, that you and several others went to meet with John Belton in North Louisiana. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. He contacted me. He advised that he had some concerns, he had some questions, and he wanted to have a conversation with that. So we decided to meet. I drove up with my staff and we had a meeting.
So he called you to set up the meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Ma'am.
And do you recall if you spoke to the governor's office or his staff before you went up to the meeting?
No, ma'am, I have not. And I say I have not. I did not speak with the governor regarding me going to meet with Mr. Belton.
And after, did you speak to him or his staff about that meeting?
Yes, ma'am. As I advised earlier, I did speak with the governor regarding that meeting.
After, though?
Afterwards.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And have you spoken to any member of the House of Representatives about this investigation? Aside from this committee.
Well, there's another committee, and yes, ma'am, I have.
The Senate committee. Let me narrow then. Have you spoken to any, actually, I can't remember if I said legislature or House of Representatives. Besides the Senate committee and the House committee, have you spoken to any members of this body?
I think so. I'm sure I have, because there's been many legislators that have expressed concern. So over those conversations, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I can't say how many and who all I've spoken with, but it's yes, ma'am. I have.
That makes sense. That they called you and you responded. I'm sure that was appreciated.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you hired a personal attorney to advise you in any of these matters?
No, ma'am.
And just to follow up like I did with your predecessor, preceding witness, have you received a target letter from federal prosecutors?
No, ma'am.
Have they requested to interview you?
Not at this time.
Have they?
No, ma'am.
They have not requested to interview
No,
you?
ma'am.
Okay. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Landry. But I think, yeah, I think before we let you go, I do want to. It came to my attention that, and Ms. Holland briefly testified to it earlier, but I'd like to get your input on non-disclosure agreements that you're making, or not making, I shouldn't say, but that are apparently been drafted in response to this investigation. Is that accurate?
So when I convened the audit team, one of the things that was recommended, and I did follow that recommendation, was to enact or create a non-disclosure. And the tenet behind that is really, oftentimes we have, as we spoke, chains of command. So to protect those employees, one, to say, hey, here are the ramifications, here are the reasons why, and I laid out their reporting requirements. I laid out, those things, the do's and don'ts. But yes, sir, I did have that drafted.
And did you require people to sign it?
Well, they should have. I don't think all of the people signed it, but yes, sir.
Did that prevent them from testifying to the federal grand jury or to the federal investigators, the NDA?
Not to my knowledge. That would be a question for the federal authorities.
I guess my saying was the NDA was not drafted to prevent that testimony, right?
No, sir. It was drafted to, as long as it was drafted to make sure that they did not disclose the contents of that particular duties and responsibilities
to the feds or to somebody else.
Just outside the scope of. Well, I didn't think of it in terms of the feds, but I would never prohibit any of my personnel from speaking to the federal authorities.
I'm just trying to get clarification on the issue, and I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I can't do that.
And Colonel Days, look, there's no more questions. I do want to say I appreciate you being here for this committee. I appreciate your testimony. I think everybody on this committee acknowledges that we've been put in an extremely difficult situation, an extremely difficult time for this agency, and it's not lost on me at all. I mean, I understand the challenges. I might disagree with some aspects of everything, but I do respect the job you have in front of you. But that said, we're out of questions for you, and I appreciate you coming in for today.
Thank you, sir.